Hello everyone, and welcome to the final review episode of the Great Ace Attorney duology. We're looking at Case 5 of Game 2, the Resolve of Ryunosuke Naruhodo. Let's not waste any time, because we have a lot to cover. We start at the courtroom lobby with some epic music. I like how they made different versions for the songs in the final trial. It sets up the tone that things are about to be epic, so it's awesome that the composers took the time to do this. Well, we get into the courtroom, and oh my god, we are so dead. Seriously, the first time I saw Strongheart, I was just wondering how we were gonna win. Like, my guy has full control over the verdict. How in the world are we gonna pull this off? And then we get to the first testimony, and oh man, I hate this one. We get some new information about this club named the Grouse, and I had no idea how this played into anything. I tried to go over the evidence, and I really couldn't find anything to present. I was just so lost that I ultimately resorted to the tactic I never used for this duology, and that's just blindly presenting evidence. This part was so frustrating, and it turns out the answer is on the back side of something we got in the start of Case 4. This confused me so much because usually they have that little info box telling you everything you need to know about a piece of evidence. If the object is 3D, you usually have to flip it around and click on places to get new information added. In this case, it doesn't mention the Grouse location on the info box, and even if you flip this paper around in Case 4 and learn about how this is a ticket for the SS Grouse, it doesn't update that information to the court record. So you basically have to remember this information from the start of Case 4, or you have to be very thorough and explore each piece of evidence, but that never occurred to me because usually these games tell you everything you need to know in the text box. Yeah, I'm still bitter because it took me so long to get this, and it tired me out. Well, let's move on from that, because we talk about how Gregson boarded the SS Grouse to assassinate someone. Cosmo has the theory because of Gregson's notebook, and Gina doesn't want to hear any of it, so she testifies in Gregson's favor. We catch Cosmo on a lie to set the stage, as he was also on board the SS Grouse, and learn that he was the assassin. We have the two mysteries of why Cosmo slashed the trunk and where Judge Jigoku disappeared to, and those are good enough thoughts to ponder while we switch perspectives. We get to play as Mikotoba, accompanied by Sholmes. This is a great idea because we get to see the interactions between these two characters, and it's a good break from the courtroom. We get an awesome throwback to the Unbreakable Speckled Band with an investigation on a steamship and our friendly sailor, Chicken Stroganoff, the brother to Beef Stroganoff. We also get to see Sholmes make deductions about Beef Stroganoff's identity, and my guy Chicken can't believe it. What a great scene. Just like Beef, Chicken is not a good liar. He tries to hide Jigoku's presence on the ship and won't let us inside Jigoku's cabin. This lets us play a little game where we have to distract Chicken, and I love it. It tests our knowledge on what we learned in Case 2 Game 1. How do we distract the sailor? Well, we can press the alarm bell and cause havoc on the ship. It doesn't matter if the cabin's locked, because Sholmes told us he can pick locks if that's the case. I'm sure a lot of Japanese players found this to be somewhat nostalgic, as there was a 2-year gap between the release of both games. We get inside the cabin, and I love it because there are so many clues inside. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final Dance of Deduction. Again, what a great throwback, since our first Dance of Deduction was also on the steamship. And I'll also say this is no normal Dance of Deduction. It is the ultimate Dance of Deduction. This is hands down the best dance in the duology, and it's not even close. Where do I even start with this masterpiece? I guess we can get the amazing music and tap dancing out of the way. I mean, those alone make this really cool. I did not expect Mikotoba to move so smooth. This dance is also the most fun to play because there's no repeated dialogue. You just do everything once. Sherlock doesn't make up any deductions that you have to correct, so you can go right into the gameplay. I guess this is to show that Sholmes took off his kitty gloves since he's with Mikotoba. Ryunosuke is a bit new to this, which is why Sholmes makes false deductions to give Ryunosuke some practice, whereas Mikotoba has done this for 6 years. And the final reason why this is the best dance is because you're actually deducing things. In the previous Dance of Deduction segments, there's barely any deduction involved. You literally just move the camera slightly and click on the other obvious object. It's kind of what Ryunosuke said in the previous case. You're just looking and saying. I never felt like a detective while playing those segments because almost all the information is hidden from you until you get to select an object, and once you do, it's very obvious what you have to select. However, in this segment, you get to investigate everything for yourself, and when you choose your answers, you can choose from anything in the room. This makes it so much better because there's a higher chance for you to get the answers wrong, and you can also deduce everything before you have to do the dance. Like, let's just go through this right now. The first thing you see is Shomes written on the sailor's arm, but the writing looks strange, and then you realize, oh, it's just numbers upside down. Then you get into the cabin, you see the ice cubes, which signify that Jigoku has recently been in the cabin, so alright, he still has to be somewhere on the ship, and we also see that the board has been moved, so we ask ourselves why the board was moved such a short distance, and the answer is that it was likely used to cover something up on that specific spot. And we also see that there is a cloth to cover up the tubes, so he didn't want any noise from the cabin to be heard. This suggests that something bad happened within the cabin for sure. We also see a trunk with a 7-digit combination, and we've seen a 7-digit combination written on the sailor's arm, so we're not 100% sure if we'll find Jigoku inside, but he's given this combination to the sailor, and if he's stuck inside, someone does need to open it later on, so it's very possible he is within the trunk, and look at that, he is. Like, that thought process that I went through right there feels so much more satisfying than turning your camera a bit to find some new piece of evidence that you've never seen before. I can't think of a single other dance of deduction where you can figure out so much of the mystery before Shomes gives you a walkthrough. It is so fun, and if they bring back this mechanic for any future game, I really hope they do it like this. Once we find Jigoku, we get a lot more tension between him and Mikotoba, which is really cool to see as they've been friends for a long time. And I have to say, it's really cool that one of the main villains of the game is the judge from Case 1. Like, damn, back when I was playing the Great Ace Attorney Adventures, I never suspected that he would be relevant at all, but the hints in that game are there. Well, that concludes the investigation segment, and it's a 10 out of 10. It's my favorite part of the entire case, and it's not hard to see why. Well, we're not quite done with this investigation yet, but this little section in Baker Street is different. We delve into the ordeal of who Iris's father is, as Iris pulled a Gigabrain play by tricking everyone into thinking she left. Not only do we have the question of Iris's father, we also get back to the question of the 4 names on the list: Kazuma Asogi, Asashin, Tobias Gregson, and John H. Wilson. Yes, things are finally heating up because we're going to delve into the biggest cliffhanger in Ace Attorney history. We figured out that Judge Jigoku was the receiver of the message. We also talked about why Shomes lied about Kazuma's death. He just didn't want the guy to come to Britain, which is understandable, but why does that involve him being stranded alone in Hong Kong? Surely they had a more hospitable way to treat Asogi than that. Like, goddamn. Thankfully, Nicolina's okay though. She ended up killing no one, but that does suck for Beef and all the other crewmates because now they're arrested for covering up a murder that wasn't an actual murder. Well, at least the wiki says he's arrested, I'm not too sure. But if he is, sad times. We also get our answer as to what the 4 names on the list means. It's an assassin exchange, and I think that's a pretty cool answer for such a big question we had since the previous game. Because now we get a new question. Why were these 2 people sent to kill Gregson and Wilson? It's good because the game still gets you thinking before we go back into the trial. With that short but great segment out of the way, it does feel like it's time to get back into the court. So Jigoku testifies about how crewmates couldn't have heard Gregson get shot, but we know that's not true. All crewmates left for a drill at one point, and Jigoku covered the pipe so no one could hear from far away. We also connect how a piece of the pocket watch was on the SS Grouse, so everything is looking good. We point out how Jigoku didn't have to go through a luggage check, which is also fine, but here's my big question. They say that Jigoku couldn't throw the body into the ocean because he was being watched by the crewmen. However, why can't he throw the body into water when he gets to Britain? Like, take in, he called a cab to go to Fresno Street, put on a disguise, and even set up a firecracker trick? But why not just throw it into the ocean since now you're not being watched? I do not understand the thought process here. Just because Gregson was meant to be at Fresno Street doesn't mean you have to put the body there and you even considered throwing the body into the ocean near the steamship area, so yeah, this makes no sense. Well, we talked about Kazuma's alibi for the crime, and I do want to say I wish they put everything in the evidence. Like, there's quite a few parts in this case where you have to rely on your memory, and I've never felt like I had to do that for any other case in the series. Yeah, you have to rely on your memory for details of the overarching story, but for the actual gameplay, they usually give all the information to you in the court record. So when Kazuma disembarked and stayed at the boarding house, I wish there was a note of that in the court record, because it's easy to forget details about that, and it's unclear what evidence they want you to present. Well, providing Kazuma's alibi is enough for us to say that Jigoku is the only one who could have done it, and we get to see this crazy breakdown where he breaks the witness stand just like he did 10 years ago. But again, I feel like there are more questionable parts to this case. So the assassination exchange didn't go as planned, but why does that mean Jigoku had to carry out the killing himself? Could he not hire other assassins in Japan? Can he not just say he wants another student to visit England and disguise the assassin that way? I just feel like there's so many other ways Jigoku could have done this to not involve himself. Well, Kazuma pulls the turnabout goodbyes where the defendant is scot-free, but we can't see the not guilty text yet because he has to pay for other crimes. We all knew this was coming, so now it's our goal to prove that Van Zieks is not the Reaper of the Bailey. I love hearing Kazuma's conversation with Gregson. Gregson admits that the evidence used to convict Genshin was fabricated. However, he did believe that Genshin was the professor and did what he needed to do to protect the country. Tobias would even give his life to protect those secrets of the Reaper. I have to say, I didn't enjoy Gregson's character too much on my first playthrough. It's funny because a few months later, here I am revisiting these cases, and I quite like his character. He's a morally gray character who sticks to his beliefs, but may take some questionable actions to reach his goals. Again, in Game 1 Case 5, he was going to sacrifice Gina. He holds his duty as an inspector and a member of the Reaper as priority, and I'll be honest, I don't like his base personality that much, and I don't care about him in cases like the Clouded Kokoro and the Return of the Great Departed Soul, but his actions throughout Case 5 of Game 1 and what we learn about him in Cases 4 and 5 of this game are very interesting, and I like him for that alone. We also get to the accusation that Strongheart is the Reaper. We try to call Mikotoba to testify about the autopsy in the hopes that we can expose it was forged, but of course, Strongheart denies our proposal. I do like how Sholmes nudges the judiciary to protest for this trial to keep going. He uses their curiosity to his advantage, which is a pretty cool way to make Strongheart give in. So the final few hours of this case involves multiple witness testimonies from the key players of the Professor incident. First up, we got Maria and Mikotoba. We find a contradiction in the autopsy report, and I love the scene where it flashes back to Mikotoba sharing his doubts with Dr. Wilson. Wilson leverages his experience and doesn't hear out Mikotoba's doubts, and it's a good way to show us the corruption behind the scenes. They also set up the atmosphere very well with the pitch black background and creepy music. This leads to everyone questioning why Genshin would admit to the crime, and we pull out our knowledge of the jailbreak plan. With that, we get set number 2 with Kaden and Vigil. I like a lot of the dialogue during the testimony with these two. Vigil feels rightly wronged by his country. I mean, he was an innocent man that lost his job to a ploy, and Kaden is standing right beside him, feeling guilty because he knew about the whole thing. Vigil also brings up the great point of why anyone would think of going through this complicated process if they were going to betray Genshin. Like, just do the execution and it's done. You've betrayed the guy. Kaden brings up that Genshin had nothing to bargain with, but we know that's not true because Genshin said the Asogi papers were his last weapon. I also want to say that Kaden makes me really mad. Like, bro, you made Daily Vigil suffer for so long, and now you're physically abusing him on the witness stand? Like, really? So after Vigil talks about how he saw scarlet ink on the will that Asogi had in his cell, we come to the conclusion that Asogi was holding Clint's will. That will was the last weapon. So Clint essentially accepted death before his investigation would finish. From this, we deduce that Clint Van Zieks is the professor. What? how can we conclude this so fast? We need something more decisive. It's plausible for sure, but how can we say that's the only possibility? The thing is, this twist isn't even that crazy, all things considered. It's quite predictable, as it's a standard Ace Attorney twist we've seen as far back as Turnabout Samurai. The person who the world thought to be an evil serial killer is innocent, and the person who the world thought to be a noble and righteous man is the true killer. Combined with Brock's insistence that Genshin is awful and how Clint was betrayed, it's not hard to believe that the game would make Clint the professor. This is also combined with the fact that he died in a different way from the rest of the victims. However, using the clues the characters have in the game, it's not enough to say Clint is the professor. Even when predicting that Clint is the professor, it's just a theory at the end. There is no decisive evidence of this fact at this point in the trial, and thus, the reveal isn't even that good. Almost everyone takes Ryunosuke's word as the truth, and Strongheart doesn't even care. He easily confesses to a secret that has been held for 10 years. And it's just so confusing because why hold the secret for so long if you're just willing to spill it out this easily? However, there are interesting things story-wise. I like how we learn that more characters were unsure of how to approach Britain's high crime rate. Clint decided it would be best to kill criminals in order for peace to be preserved. Strongheart is another character who did some questionable things just to protect the country. He knew Clint was the professor, but he didn't want law and order to become chaos, so he hid this fact from the citizens of the country. This also involves forging evidence. Again, I can't believe Strongheart just admits this, but he tells everyone about how he convinced Gregson to forge evidence in order to blame the crimes on an innocent man. So yeah, he's basically admitted to being the head of the Reaper, so now the entire judiciary knows about a 10-year secret. Also, I love how Strongheart just trusts that no one in the court will speak about what we've learned. Like, his reasoning for keeping all of this a secret was so that people would not lose faith in the law, but surely rumors are gonna start spreading since some people now know the truth. There will be an increase in uncertainty with the law, so what did you really gain from revealing the truth? He also slips up by talking even more, so we learn that the 2-paged will is actually a 3-page will, and so we finally search Karuma, find the will, and Strongheart freaks out. In Clint's will, we learn that even he had his hand forced to some extent. I mean, Clint did kill one person, but after that, Strongheart blackmailed him to kill the others. We also learned that Jigoku was the one who killed Genshin. Strongheart convinced him to shoot Genshin by bribing him with the high-ranking position, so Jigoku was not a great friend at all. Also, we know that Enoch Drebber and Tuspels also had information on the professor, so why not kill them as well? With Drebber, I could understand. The man with the mask rising from his grave does sound like some horror story that someone would make up, but with Tuspels, I don't see a good excuse. He made her swear to never reveal the waxwork's face and to never speak of the events that night, but what if she didn't keep her promise? Why do Tobias and Wilson die, but not Tuspels? And guess what? The professor's face was revealed. To be honest, I'm not sure what the impact of that was. I mean, sure, it was only us and a few others in the courtroom at the time of the reveal, but surely the news broke out, right? I mean, Tuspels should definitely know that her most famous waxwork was broken. So did that not make the newspapers? Did Kazuma not face any charges for breaking the waxwork? This part of the story does feel incomplete. Also, how can Strongheart use Jigoku's crime against him? Yeah, Jigoku killed Genshin, but is there any decisive evidence of that? Strongheart told us it happened, but how do you prove it happened? We can't be certain, so how does Strongheart leverage that against Jigoku, when Jigoku can deny his claims entirely? I just feel like there should be more clarification with a lot of these plot points. And after all these reveals, the entire cast stands up against Strongheart. There is a sense of understanding formed between the group. Kazuma stands up for Van Zieks, which is surprising as he despised him just some time ago, and everyone who has a main role believes that what Strongheart did was wrong and he isn't fighting crime at all. Because of this, Strongheart starts doing these funny Damon Gant claps and brings up the point that he didn't directly commit any crimes. Apparently, being the head of an organization that kills people isn't enough to convict this guy if he didn't do any of the killing himself. Yeah, strange game logic, I know. And what's crazy is, the people in the gallery side with Strongheart. They are in favor of what he's doing, even if he's responsible for the deaths of some innocent people. With that, we're backed into a corner, so there's only one thing to do. Call Sholmes, with this banger pursuit theme playing in the back. Are you guys ready to see the most magical thing you've already seen? Introducing holographic technology in the 19th century. Yes, in 2019, they're using flip phones, but back in the 18th century, they had holograms that could be projected from far distances. Watch the holograms dance as Strongheart dies. Okay, on a serious note though, I'm okay with this. Yeah, this doesn't make any sense at all, but I think they just wanted to go all out with the presentation at the end. Hence why we got this pursuit theme that is grander than any pursuit themes we've heard before, and some cool visuals with Sholmes dancing. I'm fine with this because you could theoretically do it in a way that makes sense. Like, you could say he planted a recording device somewhere in the courtroom, and then you could use a phone call to contact Sholmes, and he could literally hand over the phone to the queen so she can give her formal testimony that Strongheart is revoked of his title. Using the queen is a sensible way to get rid of someone with so much power, because the queen has the most power of all. So yeah, that works. And then we get to watch something even more beautiful. Talk about a grand breakdown. This is easily the best breakdown in the series, and it's not even close. Like, damn, they put so much effort into this. Truly an epic victory as Strongheart just gets burned to death. But the sheer epicness of this fairy tale doesn't end here, because we've got the most epic scene in the game. Santa takes his rightful place in the judge's chair to deliver an uplifting speech and pronounces Barack Van Zieks not guilty. So we get the whole post-trial conversations. Barack and Cosma settle their differences, which is nice to see. It's a good way of showing how pursuing the truth and remaining open-minded can help others. We learn that Iris is the daughter of Clint Van Zieks, and it's fun seeing the characters react to that. The final hour of the case in general is nice. Again, I've said that I don't like Sholmes or Iris that much, but I have to say the moment where Iris considers Sholmes to be her true dad is a tearjerker moment. Their relationship was built throughout the duology, so the payoff does hit. It's cool seeing that Gina wants to carry Gregson's legacy, and Ryunosuke making his decision to help the legal system in Japan, even if that means saying farewell to all of his friends. We also get to see Cosma reflect on his actions and realizing how much revenge has changed him. It's a good conclusion to his character as he vows to become a better person. We also have Susato being courageous enough to ask Ryunosuke if she can go to Japan with him, and we end off with a cool scene where Ryu and Cosma draw their swords in front of a beautiful sunrise. Our main duo sails away, and we get an awesome end credit sequence like usual. So it's time to give concluding thoughts about the case and the game as a whole. For this case, I'd say it's an 8 out of 10. It's fun to play throughout. I think aside from the part where you have to present the SS Grouse ticket, I was enjoying the entire experience. But I will say, it is strange because I've went through this case twice. The first time was when I actually played the game for myself, and the second time was when I just watched a playthrough to recall everything so I could write this review, and both experiences were quite different. With my first playthrough, I was kind of disappointed with how predictable everything was. And the reason for that was because a lot of its predictability came from knowing what Ace Attorney does. Like knowing these standard Ace Attorney tropes. Don't get me wrong, it had a lot of predictability that was good as well. Like some of its predictability just came from good hints that were given in cases 3 and 4. But I remember the first time I played this, and almost every 5 minutes, I was just thinking to myself, wow, this is a ripoff of Turnabout Goodbyes. Like, there's so many aspects taken from Turnabout Goodbyes and Rise from the Ashes, and it was insane because I could remember exact segments that just felt like a copy. However, I didn't feel that much in my second watch through almost a year later. Like, yes, I can still recognize a lot of the similarities, the prosecutor being the defendant, the fake gunshot disguising the actual crime that happened earlier, the mysterious gunshot years earlier that ended up killing someone. But I didn't mind a lot of the similarities on my watch through, and I didn't feel like I was noticing them as much as I did before. Maybe I felt like that in my first playthrough because I had played Ace Attorney 1 recently at that point. Like, I played the Great Ace Attorney 2 2 months after I beat the first Ace Attorney game, so I think the similarities felt really clear because of that, and that was something that did hamper my enjoyment of the case to an extent. Like, watching a playthrough of this case a year later made a lot of the sections in the case more enjoyable, which was interesting to see. I will say though, Strongheart not killing anyone was a good twist, and that caught me off guard. My prediction was that Strongheart would be the true killer of Clint Van Zieks, and when Genshin said he killed one person, I thought that referred to him killing someone when him and Barak got attacked, and Barak didn't seem to know what happened. So that was a good way the game didn't follow the usual formula, because normally the main villain is also a killer. However, with my second playthrough, I noticed a lot more problems with the plans of the villains, which is something I won't think about too much when I'm trying to play the game for my first time, because I want to enjoy the game rather than thinking about it too much. I never like hyper analyzing games on a first playthrough, because I just like that first playthrough to be as enjoyable as possible. Oh yeah, and we do have to mention the jury coincidences. There are a lot of jury coincidences, and the reason for that is not discussed. However, the only case where I think it matters a lot is Case 5 of Adventures, so in the end, it's not a huge deal. I get that they needed these coincidences to save space, so I'm not really mad at the jury. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed this case as much as I did my first playthrough, and that enjoyment is around an 8 out of 10 in score. So that concludes my overall thoughts about the case, and now I want to talk about some of the characters that I haven't given my opinions on. First off, Kazuma. I think he's good. I think they made his change believable and developed his character by breaking this persona that he's some legendary human being that has no flaws. It's a good setup and payoff. I also like Strongheart as the main villain. It was interesting to have a main villain who's so nice to our heroes, but in the end, his obsession with power showed us his true character. I also like how he thinks everything he does is for the good of the country, and that is true to an extent, but at a certain point, Strongheart does what is best for him, and his idea that everything should progress in an organized manner is what made him take crazy actions. To me, he's like a combination of Damon Gant and Light Yagami, so that's pretty fun. Again, I wish he didn't just reveal everything so easily. That part of his character felt off, but overall, he was still an enjoyable villain. And we also had Jigoku as a villain. I like Jigoku. Again, like Strongheart, he's able to stay calm and happy during situations that don't look too good for him, but he's not as composed in the end. You get to see those moments where he looks worried and where he gets angry. I also like how they made it seem like Jigoku had no choice when he killed Gregson, but we get to see his true character when we learn the story about him killing Genshin. It's almost scary that this man was friends with Mikotoba for so long, and it makes you feel angry towards him and sad for Genshin, because Genshin is that friend that Mikotoba deserved to have. And speaking of Mikotoba, I thought he was okay. Not anything crazy. Of course, it's great to see him as the partner of Sholmes, which is something different from his role as a mentor, and that's about all I can say. He did what he needed to for the story. As for the game as a whole, I think it's one of the best in the Ace Attorney series for sure. This game excels because it has consistency. If you look at it from a pure entertainment standpoint, this game is enjoyable throughout. Yeah, it's a really long game, but I can't say there are many moments where I'm not having fun. There were a few frustrating gameplay moments, and I think there were parts in Case 3 and 4 where I was like, okay, this is kind of uneventful, but those are just a few moments in an otherwise entertaining game. And I think that's where I want to start, by looking at how Resolve improved on Adventures. First, and what I feel is the biggest improvement, is the pacing. Resolve is paced in a way where it continues to be eventful, whether it be building up characters, getting new clues for a mystery, going through exposition to progress the story. Resolve will always have you hooked with something. And what goes hand in hand with the pacing is the gameplay. In Adventures, we had slow-paced gameplay, where it's over-reliant on pressing statements and the dance of deductions take forever. In Resolve, you still have some of these problems, but they are greatly reduced. I generally feel like some of the cases in Adventures were padded out for no reason. There was a lot of repetition with plot points and a lot of scenes that didn't need to exist. I mean, a perfect example of padding is the adventure of the Clouded Kokoro. Think about how simple that case is. A couple fights, which leads to a book and knife being thrown out the window. The knife hits olive green, so Saki runs away. A couple sees this, and while one of them calls the police, the other moves the evidence to the other side of the road because he doesn't want to do his work. And yeah, that's the full case. I remember all of this despite not touching the game for so long because it's so simple. Yet, it's around 7 to 8 hours to play, so there's just a lot of padding that drags the adventure out for far longer than it should. Compare this to Memoirs of the Clouded Kokoro. Memoirs has a lot more going on with the cool coin scheme that tricks a gas company, a poisoning case that also involves a locked room scenario, but at the same time, it recaps you on the adventure of the Clouded Kokoro and brings elements of that case into the story to tie both cases together. It has a lot more going on in the same amount of time, and I think that's why Resolve is a more fun experience overall. As for the characters, I've explained how I felt about most of them, but let's talk about our main duo, since I haven't mentioned them too much. Ryunosuke is a great protagonist. He's goofy and has his funny moments. He becomes more confident in his skills as time passes, and he has that drive that allows him to do so many crazy things, like studying to become a lawyer in a short period of time. He also has characteristics that can be seen as flaws, which I do like, such as not taking action unless being asked, and not standing up for himself. There's a good mix of traits here, but I do have to say, he doesn't make much of an impact in the Great Ace Attorney 2. He's not that different from how he was in the first game, and it's in that first game where we see how he handles various situations, like being put on trial, stowing onto a ship, defending a killer, and growing into someone with more confidence. I'd say the same for Susato. Susato would be my favorite Ace Attorney character if we were to look at just the first game, but the second game treats her as a shell of her former self. After case 1, where we get to see the hilarious situation of her being an attorney, we get almost nothing afterwards. Case 2 to 5 leaves her with almost nothing. She doesn't have funny moments where we see different sides to her character. There's almost nothing, so she definitely took the biggest blow in this game. I liked her anger towards her dad in case 4, and asking to go with Ryunosuke in case 5, but that's about it. Still, I'd say overall, she's one of my favorite Ace Attorney characters just because of the first game, plus the blossoming attorney. Actually, I think I can say the same for Gina as well. This game did a good job with continuing her story as a detective, but most of the reasons I like her comes from the first game. And when I think about it, I like the character writing and individual case stories more in the Great Ace Attorney 1. Adventures has so many interesting plots, and the way it uses its characters are amazing. I think its characters and stories are the best in the series, which is surprising because it's not a contender for my favorite game. But when you think of what the best visual novel would have, you'd think about the story and characters first. But that goes to show that characters and story are not all that matters when creating a fun game. Pacing is really important. The Adventure of the Clouded Kokoro would be one of my favorite cases of all time if all the fat was cut. And The Adventure of the Great Departure would be greatly improved as well. That case has a lot of good story elements and character moments. I like how they set up the troubles with Japan and Britain, and the story with how the sergeant didn't have enough money to support his family. It's a really good story, but it's padded out with a lot of filler and uninteresting gameplay. Even a case I really like, The Unspeakable Story, would be better if it wasn't padded out. The Great Ace Attorney 2 has worse stories and characters in my opinion, but that doesn't matter too much because they're still done really damn well. It's not like the characters and stories suck. They're still phenomenal, and on top of that, it fixes the pacing and the gameplay. The Great Ace Attorney 1 is a very uneven game. It has the best story and characters, but the worst gameplay and some of the worst pacing in the series as well. However, the Great Ace Attorney 2 is just balanced. It's great at everything. And you know what? I think this is my favorite game in the series. There is one game that could potentially fight for that spot, but right now, I feel that this game is my favorite. And that's great, because this is the most recent Ace Attorney game. Ace Attorney is in a good position. It has been about 5 years, and no new game has come out, and I have no doubt that something new is coming. But for now, we can just enjoy the 11 games we have. That's plenty, and that's what I'll continue to do as I review these cases. We've concluded this duology, and next up, it's time to conclude the original trilogy. That's right, next time we are covering Trials and Tribulations. See you guys then.